Welcome to lectures number 17 on the Kuzari, on the Sefer Kuzari. We are in, excuse me, in the second essay, the Ma'amar Hasheni, and we are up to paragraph number 21 or 22. I'm going to start with 21 today. In this version, which I think most of you have, the Korobkin English version, it will be on page 177. If you have any other version, then look for the second essay, paragraph 21. And the last week we studied the description of the centrality and importance of Eretz Yisrael, of the land of Israel, um, and the Chaver, the rabbi's description to the Khazar King of the significance of the land of Israel. And Israel was depicted as the central of the natural universe. So it was like literally the center of the universe. He described. We had a long description of the time zones and the international date line. We did all that last week, and how the days, the holidays, and Shabbat, how they are based on Israel and Jerusalem's centrality, on how Israel is the only place in the world where prophecy exists, how Israel is considered Lifnei Hashem, before God. And the bottom line that we really learned out of the whole thing was the deep inherent holiness that, and I'm using the word inherent because I think that's the right word, that inheres in the land of Israel, right? That there's a palpable, real, measurable. And if you had a some sort of device that could measure holiness, it would go off the rails if you were in Israel, right? Now, we mentioned a little bit of the contrast between that and the Rambam's understanding, but most of our focus is really on Yehuda Halevi and his understanding of this issue. Now, today we're going to go even deeper and into the significance of the land of Israel, and more specifically, the importance of living there for all of us today. And this is one of the reasons why, and I know I've said this many times in this class, but really the foundations for the philosophy and the idea that as Jews in the diaspora today, we should pick ourselves up and move to Israel in order to bring about the redemption. The origins of that entire concept and that entire idea is really brought out most importantly and earliest by Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in what we're studying together right now. That's not to say that there aren't, of course, many other places many other writers that have written about the topic and the holiness of Israel. That, of course, goes throughout the centuries. There's plenty of places where that's discussed. However, where it's so clearly laid out as, and you'll see, we discussed this a lot last week and a little bit the week before as well. And this week we're going to go even more depth into it. So truly the foundations of the yearning for people to get up and go to Israel and to settle the land and live there, no matter what the circumstances, in order to bring about the redemption. This is a central theme, and the Yehuda Halevi is really the first one to really establish that as an important concept and idea among the Jews of the diaspora, hundreds of years, if not almost 1,000 years after the destruction of the temple and our dispersion throughout the diaspora. So let's see. I'm going to read 21, even though we read it last time, paragraph 21. Amar Kuzari, so the Khazar King says, Hashmi'eni masha zochor lecha midivreihem banose. Tell me a little bit of some details, some statements that you can remember, offhand, regarding this topic of how special the land of Israel is. And Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is about to tell us in chapter 22, paragraph 22, many both halachic and agadic, meaning, in other words, halachic statements, that in Jewish law, that where the special holiness of Israel is relevant as a matter of law, even today, right? And also agadic statements about the greatness of the special holiness of the land of Israel. So Omar Chaver. So the Chaver, the rabbi, answers the king like this: Mizos. And remember, this is just a selection of ideas. That's what Rabbi Yehuda Levi is just literally shooting off his head a selection of places where the specialness and greatness of the land of Israel is discussed. Mizos Masha Amru. Some of these examples are some of the things that said. And remember, the Hebrew that I'm reading is from Michael Schwartz's Hebrew translation, which is a modern Hebrew translation direct from the original Arabic. So an example of that is Hakol Malin Eretz Yisrael ve'ein Hakol Morid. Anyone can be Mala, can bring others to the land of Israel, but not everyone can push others to leave the land of Israel. And this is referring to a specific situation, which he's about to say. And I'm sorry, I got to silence my phone. Um, I'm sorry. You know what? I got to pause for a minute in order to take a call. So just give me 1 second. I apologize. So he was just mentioned, he was talking about the halachic statement of one person forcing or bringing someone else to Israel, but not out of Israel. It's referring to a specific situation of Vidinam, she'isham hamisoreves laleches. If a husband wants to move to the land of Israel, right? The halacha is that she's required to accompany him. Now, he's not allowed to force her, but if she refuses to go, he can divorce her without giving her the ksuba, right? Giving her the monetary compensation that's due to any divorcee. Now it's not the time now to go into all the details of this particular law, because there's all kinds of caveats and exceptions to the rule. But the general this is the general law, and the reason is because of the special importance of moving and live to the land of Israel to live there. So and the opposite would be kasher misarev o ishlach zemi. Let's say the woman wants to move to the land of Israel, but the husband doesn't want to. Yotzivi Tenksuba, then we can force him to divorce her, and he has to pay her the divorce the money that's due to a divorcee, so that she could move to the land of Israel. And the rabbis would force him to do that divorce if she's the one that wants to go. So it kind of goes both ways, right? So that's one halachic area where we see a special how special it is to live in the land of Israel. Umasha Amru, and that which Chazal, the rabbi said, La'olam yadur adam be'eretz Yisrael v'afilu be'ir shegaru b'gayim. It's better for a person to live in the land of Israel, even if the majority of the people there are non-Jews, right? But rather than live outside Israel, even if you live in a Jewish community. So someone might say, well, I live in this beautiful community here in Brooklyn, New York, or Lakewood, New Jersey, surrounded by thousands of Jews, and there's a kosher restaurant in every corner and a beis medrash on every block, and 10 and 16 yeshivas to choose from, and schools for my daughters, and I can get every kind of kosher food you can imagine. If I go to Israel, whatever it's not nearly as good. Well, I'm sorry, but that's not the way it works. It's better to live in Israel, even if the majority of the people there are not Jewish. Now, that would have been true in his time, where there were very few Jews living in Israel. But in our time, it's not that way anymore. In Israel, there's obviously more Jews than pretty much anywhere you can live in the diaspora. So Shekol Hadar Beretz Yisrael, and why is that? Because anyone who lives in the land of Israel, Dome Lemishi Yesh Lo Eloha, is similar to someone who has a God. V'chol Hadar B'chutz L'Aretz Dome Lemishi Ein Lo Eloha. But anyone who lives outside of Israel is comparable to someone who does not have a God.
Rabbi, but just even
Yes?
the specific Gemara in Ketubah talks even about a city. So Hebron, for example, is absolute majority of non-Jews.
Not Jews. Okay.
There are Jews living there, but I think that is still applicable where there's even a city that is the absolute majority is non-Jews and
Right. Yeah, and it would
sorry.
be better to live there than to live in America or somewhere else in diaspora, even in a heavily Jewish neighborhood.
Yes,
Um,
sorry. That's what I wanted to just.
Now, exactly the meaning of this phrase, that one who lives in Israel is like someone that has a God. Someone that lives outside of Israel is like someone that doesn't have a God. I don't have a. There's a lot of different ways it's explained and understood. Um,
It's based on a
um,
verse from
yeah,
Tehillim, where David says that they told him to go live in a land without a
right.
God.
Right, yeah, it's about to. It's about to. He's about to quote that. V'cheinu omer b'David, similar as it says by King David, right? Ki gershuni hayom mehistapeach benachlas Hashem. Right, they have sent me away from living within the inheritance of God. Lemar lech avoda limachem, to tell me I should go worship other gods. Right, and realize that wasn't what they were saying. They were kicking him out. Right, lomer lecha, meaning like going, leaving Eretz Yisrael is like worshiping avodah zarah. A simple understanding of that would be, um, I mean, the way the Kuzari is understanding that is there's a special inherent holiness in Israel that when one is there, one is closer to God, right? And that holiness is not to be found outside of Israel, and therefore it is as if you're living not in the presence of God, right? Remember, the Kuzari is taking the position, or when I say, I mean, Rabbi Levi is taking the position that the inherent holiness of Israel brings you a special proximity, so to speak, to God. Limitzrayim kavu malal shararotzos. We know that in rabbinic tradition, the land of Egypt has a special advantage over other lands. And why is that? We'll mention in a minute. Vidanu al shar arotzos mikal v'chomer, and they said regarding other lands from a kal v'chomer, right? The Amr, they said Uma Mitzrayim shenichus aleha bris, the Egypt within which the covenant was made, right? So there's different ways to understand what the Kuzari is saying here. What the it could mean that it's Nichos Alayim Bris because Egypt borders on Israel. It's mentioned in relationship to delineate the land of Israel. But the most people understand this to mean Egypt was where the covenant between God and the Jewish people began, right? That's where our relationship started. And so Shara Ratzos, if you can't even live there, it's better not to live there. Instead, we should live in the land of Israel. Certainly, we shouldn't live in other lands which don't have such a deep history of the relationship, the special relationship between God and the Jewish people. Midivram and some other statements of Chazal, of the rabbis, Kol HaKover Be'eretz Yisrael. So even someone who's just buried in the land of Israel, Ki'ilu Kover Tachas Mizbeach. It's as if he's buried underneath the altar itself. And yeah, it's wonderful to have your body go there, but it's someone who dies there, meaning he went there during his lifetime and lived out the end of his life there, is much better off than someone who lives his life outside Israel and just goes as a corpse to the land of Israel, right? Because they said, you cannot compare someone that the holiness of Israel captured and enveloped him when he was alive, like someone who the special holiness of Israel enveloped him and captured him, so to speak, after he was only after he was dead. Yes, Arcane, more than that, Amru, they stated, regarding someone who had the opportunity to live there, to reside there, but decided not to. And he said regarding and he said, well, I could have went in my life, but I didn't. But he said, bring me there after I am dead. So he said, they said regarding him, right? In your lifetime, you said you made out my special inheritance, my special place, the land of Israel. You treated it as if it was disgusting to you. You didn't like it. So then in your death, you're going to come and defile me. In other words, you're going to bring your corpse, which is tameh. It's impure. So in your lifetime, I wasn't good enough. Now in your death, you're going to come and bring your body here, right? But yeah, it's fine, it's great, it's wonderful to be buried there, but that's not the same as living there. Kasher Nishal Rabbi Hananya, and we have another story in Chazal where Rabbi Hananya was asked the question: a person had a brother who left the land of Israel, and He died without children. So somebody asked, it's a mitzvah for him to go and marry the widow, right? Should he leave Israel and go to wherever it was that he lived, probably Babylon or whatever in those days, and marry her? And it's to be Mekayim the mitzvah. It's right. So he rugzo, he got angry, and Ad Kadesh Amar, to the extent that he stated as follows: Achiv Nasa Goya, his brother married a Gentile woman, right? Even though she wasn't actually a Gentile woman, but he's calling her as if she was, right? Baruch Hamakom Shaharago. Thank God that he died, right? Who Yerid Acharov, he should go after him, right? In other words, it's a pretty extreme statement, and obviously we don't know all the circumstances, what kind of guy this brother was and his wife was, etc. But regardless, the point being that he caught, even though she was a Jewish woman, but he was as if, because she willingly left Israel, she didn't have to leave. She willingly went with her husband, right? We said before, you don't have to leave. You can't. She can force him to stay, but so why should you go there? And we know that one cannot sell land to a Gentile in the land of Israel. Limkar harisos shel bayis olo osiro chore v'asru, and they prohibited to demolish homes there, or to leave places not built and not developed. Miskashel is mashamru, and tied to this and connected to this is that which they said, Ein danin dine knasos ela be'eretz Yisrael. All of the laws of fines, right? The fines that are the Torah established, for different kinds of circumstances. There's different fines, like the fine of kefil, the double payment that a person has to pay if he steals from someone else. Or there's a long list of fines. That part of legal law is only ruled in the land of Israel. That a slave, a servant, you can't leave the Holy Land and force your servant to come with you, right? He's allowed to stay, right? And you have to free him. And many other such similar statements that talk about the special importance of the land of Israel. Hey, Mamru, they also said Avira Deretz Yisrael Machim, the atmosphere within the land of Israel makes one wise. It's just a special atmosphere. And in order to make the land beloved to people, Amru, they said, anyone that even walks just 4 the cubits, which is approximately 6 feet in the land of Israel, muftach, he is promised ben olam haba, that he is the person worthy of the world to come. Rabbi Zera Amar al Hamin, El Hamin. Rabbi Zera said to a min. A min is it could be translated in various ways, but some form of heretic. Many and most modern scholars understand that whenever the Talmud uses the term min, it's referring to an early Christian, right? It's a little bit controversial if that's true or not, but most scholars today understand that the term min, it refers to a specific type of heretic, which is referring to an early Christian. But regardless of whether that's true or correct or not, Rabbi Zera said to a particular min, Shetan kenegdo, madua mitoch sheheshtokek laver le'etz Yisrael uporetz laver es anar b'mlima bara. Right? He asked him, right, why you're so anxious to go to the land of Israel that you're going even where there's no I'm just curious to see for a second how he translates the min.
Ferry is what I learned.
What?
Ferry.
A ferry? No. I was looking to see how he translates a min. Uh,
Oh,
um, um, No, he just calls him a heretic, whatever. But he had no mabara is something that passes, that brings you across. So it could be a bridge, or it could be some form of way of getting across the river. And he was making fun of him, like, "What's the big deal?" So there's no way to go, so don't go, right? So, and he said, "Duchta de Moshe v'Aaron lo zachule mi yemar de a special place where Moshe and Aaron did not have to the special zuchus, the special merit to live there. How do I know that I'll have the merit to live there? In other words, I should do whatever means I can to get there, because I might not have the special merit. So therefore, I'm going to do everything I can, even when it's not easy, to go. So these were just some examples of so the Khazar king asked him to for some a taste of some examples of things that the Torah, that Chazal, that the rabbis tell us about how special the land of Israel is. So he brought this as a selection. Obviously, there's a lot more, but this is a selection of how special and how important the land of Israel is. And all of these pretty much were referring to nowadays. So there's no temple, there was no Jewish sovereignty, certainly, and at the time of the Kuzari, especially, there was almost no Jews there. Remember, when this book was written, it was during the time of the Christian Crusader kingdom. So the people that ruled the land of Israel was at this time was the Christian Crusaders, and they pretty much, there was almost no Jews. They didn't allow any Jews into, certainly not Jerusalem, but very few Jews were living there at this time. So but still, we should go. We should want to go. We should do everything we can to get there. Fine. So this was his selection of statements of Chazal that describe how special and how beautiful the land of Israel is. All right. So now that we did this, so let's see chapter 23, and this is where the Khazar king has a very sharp rebuke for the rabbi, the Chaver, and you can hear in this an echo of, this conversation with the Khazar king, with the Chaver, is clearly Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is imagining himself as the Chaver, as the rabbi, and so he's challenging himself, right? He's putting a challenge to himself in the words of the Khazar king. Amar Kuzari. So the Khazar king responded as follows: Im Kain, if this is true, so you just told me how important it is to live there. Rabbi Zera was ready to swim across the river to get there, right? A woman can force her husband to get. That's something that in those days is unimaginable. Women weren't allowed to force their husbands to do anything, right? But in Chazal, the law is she can make him go, right? So, right? You are being lazy. You are being negligent in something that the Torah tells you you're supposed to do. What are you doing here in Chazaria, having a discussion with me in my royal palace? You should be on a boat or donkey or whatever, however you get there, right? You're not on your way to that place, right? You're not making it the place where you live, and it's not the place where you're dying. When you go and may say this prayer, Rachem al Zion ki beis chayenu, God have mercy on Zion, because this is the place where we live. Ki beis chayenu, it is the home where we live, right? You believe, right, that this is the place where God's resting, his presence will return to. And even if you didn't believe in some future redemption, right, it is still the place where the even if all it was the place where approximately 900 years ago, right, to give you a sense for about when this took place, right, it was approximately a little bit less than 1,000 years after the destruction of the temple, right? Wait, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Where the Shechina, where it was lived for approximately 900 years. Sorry, the 900 years here is the approximately 400 plus years of the first temple and 400 plus years of the second temple. So approximately 900 years where both temples stood, right? And it was a place where people's souls would have security there, and would have refuge there. Just like nowadays, there's something special about being in the presence of a person who's righteous, a person who's holy, among the prophets, right? And Israel certainly has that special significance. So Ma'agam Shehi Shara Shemayim, even more so, this is the place where the gates of heaven are there. Everyone, all the nations agree to this. You're not the only ones. Remember, this isn't a time where when when the world leaders got together, like now they're getting together in Davos, Switzerland. In those days, the world leaders got together. They were screaming and yelling and arguing and talking about Israel. That's what was going on then. The Crusades were going on then. The entire Europe was engulfed in a war with the entire North Africa and Middle East over Israel, right? So this is everybody agrees that this is a special place, right? The Christians, they think that all the souls go to Israel and that's where they go up to heaven from. And the Muslims, they think that's where their prophet went up to heaven. They think all prophets go to heaven through that special, I don't know, portal that's in Israel. And they all agree, or at least the Muslims, according to the Khazar King. I don't know if this is true. Someone, if they know Islam, they can tell me. But it's where all of the souls will gather in the time of the resurrection of the dead. And for everyone, it's a place where we pray towards, and people go there on pilgrimages, right? So so when you bow down and you pray towards that place, it's just a habit. It's if anything, it's fake, right? What you're praying to Israel, you're saying all these things. Why aren't you going? Right? Your forefathers wanted to go there and they didn't want to stay where they grew up. Obviously, the first one he's thinking of is Avraham Avinu, Abraham, who left the place where he lived and went to the land of Israel, right? But they would rather be strangers there rather than be a member of the family of the club here where we speak the language, we know the culture and everything, but they'd still rather go there where they don't speak the language, they're not familiar with the culture, they're outsiders, they'd still rather be there. And that was even before God, the God's presence was recognizable there. It was a place full of people that were doing all kinds of terrible things. It was a time of idol worship and all kinds of terrible things, but still the forefathers went there. Zuam was feeling they were worshiping idols and they were doing all kinds of disgusting things. Achem lo kivu, right? But nonetheless, their entire hope, their entire yearning was to be attached to this place. They refused to leave unless God told them they should leave. But other than that, Yaakov Avinu didn't want to leave Israel, even though there was famine. Right? Avraham Avinu only left when there was famine, when there's no, and when God told him to go. Otherwise, he never would have left. And we know how much the forefathers that did die outside, like famously, Yaakov and Yosef, asked that their bones should be brought back. So what's kind of everything you're telling me is fake? Go, right? Why are you sitting here? You should be going. So this is the next paragraph is a very famous response of the Kuzari, and it really encapsulates the feeling that Rabbi Yehuda Levi had. And as we know from history, if you remember from the first lecture, Rabbi Yehuda Levi did, in the end of his life, act upon this, and he did pick up and go, right? He did go to the land of Israel. It had a very tragic ending, but he did leave and go, and he just sacrificed everything to pack up his bags and go. So he says, Omar Chaver, says the Chaver, Nazafta bi, you have ashamed me, Melech HaKuzarim, king of the Chazars. You got me there. You're right. You're absolutely right. And then he says something that's really powerful. And these thoughts underlie a lot of Zionist thinking, and and a lot of ways. It's a way to understand a large segment of Tanakh, and I'm going to explain that and what I mean in a minute. And it's a source of let's talk about it. Let's open this up. I mean, this is going to open up some of the hard things between Israel, Jews that live in the land of Israel and Jews that don't, and it has its echoes and deep things today, right? So the in the Torah, right, in Tanakh, we have several books that were written, right, during the early Second Temple period, right, when Cyrus had given the Jews permission to go back to the land of Israel, permission to rebuild the temple, and only a few Jews went. Right, so the books that are famous, of course, the last three of the prophets of the 12 minor prophets, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, are three books of the prophets of the early Second Temple period, and of course the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. Right, those famous books from this time period. Now, when the Jews came, it's evident. I'm sorry, I just have to make sure. No, this is not something I need to worry about. Um, um, when the Jews of this time period originally went, right, it's clear from learning through these Sifrei Tanakh. It's really, if you really want to learn about this time period from the Tanakh perspective, you need to read those five books: Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi, Ezra, and Nehemiah. Um, and the it's clear that the Jews that went were a minority, right? They were not the majority. Most Jews stayed in Babylon. There was already a diaspora in other places too by then. There was already a diaspora in Egypt, possibly even as far away as Spain or Yemen, who knows? But certainly in Babylon and Persia, there was a significant number of Jews, and most of the Jews stayed. The Jews that went with the expectation that this was going to be the spectacular return to Israel that they read about in the books of the Bible. Like they're expecting a splitting of the sea and the splitting of the Jordan River and all of the incredible events of the book of Joshua, the conquering with the sun standing still. They're expecting, the fireworks and fire and brimstone and lightning from the sky and all kinds of things. They're expecting a big, beautiful temple and prophecy and everything. And what they got was nothing. They got there. Jerusalem was a ruin. They didn't even know how to build. To the extent that they could build, they were able to put up an altar, pile a couple of stones up, and make an altar. They couldn't build, and the people around would make trouble for them and report them back to Cyrus, and Cyrus withdrew his support, so now they had no money, and the land was ruled by a bunch of brigands running around causing crime and problems and trouble, and all of the rich brethren that they were waiting for big donations from back in Persia were not coughing up any money or support, and Ezra and Nehemiah had to go back and try to get more support, and it was a mess, and it was not what they all wanted. It was not what they all thought, right? Eventually, we know they managed to build the second temple, but it never became what everyone hoped and dreamed it would be. It never became the ultimate redemption. Now, why is that? Right? Why did the second temple never? Why didn't it become the last and final temple? Right? So there's throughout the Jewish literature, in those five books, you'll find references to people's lack of devotion, corruption, a lot of things that it's blamed upon. But what Yehuda Levi here is going to zero in on is why didn't all the other Jews come, right? Lay the fault of it at their feet, right? Right. If all the Jews would have come when we're about to study paragraph 24, then it would have been that redemption. Now, certainly there are verses and there are things that you can get support for this view, right? But there's definitely other views and other ways to understand that episode in history. And when you learn through those Sfarim and Tanakh, you'll see a lot of the criticisms of, why weren't people so one thing is like the people weren't enough devoted. They didn't work hard enough. They didn't put into it enough. They were too lazy, too preoccupied with their own material needs and wants, too preoccupied with looking good to everyone else that was around there, too preoccupied with assimilating into the other peoples that were there. So Rabbi Yehuda Levi is going to lay that blame to a large degree on, if all the other Jews would have come, then they would have been given the surge of energy and they would have wanted to be devoted to rebuilding, and it would have ended up being the ultimate redemption. you can understand how a modern Zionist, right? I know pretty much all the people on this in this chat, what I don't know, whatever you call it, in this lecture here now, we're all Jews living in the diaspora. Some people might be might watch this, might be watching it from the land of Israel. So all of us are guilty of this sin of not going, right? Myself included. That's why I can say this to you, right? Now, but you can understand how a Jew in Israel today would think the same way, right? If the gates of Aliyah are open, right? If all the Jews of the world would come, we could fix half the problems that we have over here, right? Half of the issues we have of security is there's a problem of demographics. We can solve the problem of demographics. If I don't know how many Jews there are in the world, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but let's say there's 10 million Jews living in the diaspora. I honestly, somebody might know the number. If all those 10 million would pick up today and move to Israel, the demographic problem wouldn't exist. Our security problems wouldn't exist, right? Our economic problems would, maybe we'd have some other economic problems, but we'd certainly have all of the wealth and the resources that would be brought in, and the skills and the knowledge and the know-how and the education of all the people would come. Imagine what Israel would look like. So, and it's remarkable taking a book that was written 1,000 years ago, describing events that happened 1,000 years before him, and now it's 1,000 years later, and this issue is still relevant, right? It's still relevant. I don't think that any other people in the world could have this kind of discussion, you know. So let's learn paragraph 24, and then I'm going to open for discussion the topic and see what people have to say. So first, let's see how Rabbi Levi says. I gave you a little hint as to what he's going to say, but let's read it in his words. So Amar HaChaver, says the rabbi, the Chaver answers as follows: Nozafta you embarrassed me, right? Chet zeh, this sin, in other words, this sin of me not going to the land of Israel to live, hu asher mana et hashlomat havtochasu shel Elohim b'bayit sheni. This is what kept back God's promise in the second temple, that the promise of the completion, right? The end of world history, which should have happened at the second temple. This is why. But Amro, when God made the promise, Rani b'simchi bas be happy, be joyful, bas daughter of Zion, he's quoting Zechariah. Remember, Zechariah was a prophet who said these words in the early days of the second temple, right? So Zechariah was saying, this Zion, this Zion, this rebuilding is it. This is the promise, or at least has the potential to be the be all and end all of redemption, right? I do want to make a little aside, because I made an assertion once, a couple times actually, in one of these lectures. I don't remember when, and I was very emphatic about it. But I'm going to use this as support again. That the idea that it's up to us to make the redemption happen is one of the most fundamental and foundational ideas of the Jewish religion. And we see that here again. Zechariah, the prophet, was saying, Rani v'simchi bas Tzion, right? This is the redemption, right? And why didn't it happen? Because we sinned. Now, how you interpret the sin, right, is up to you. Rabbi Yehuda Levi is interpreting it because we didn't move. We didn't leave the comforts of Persia and Babylon, right? Had we left and had we all went, that would have been the redemption. Why wasn't it the redemption? Because we didn't go, right? So in other words, again, and we see this again and again and again throughout all of Jewish thought, 100%, right? It's up to us to bring the redemption. It's not up to some magic from the sky that's going to come flying down on a white horse and make it all happen. It's always up to us. So that's a very fundamental foundational idea of Judaism, which is very different from certain other religions, right? But anyway, I had to say that because it's an important point. I think it's an important point. But let's get back to Yehuda Levi. Hadavar Heloki hayamuchan la'ashiva kever yishona, right? Godliness, the Spirit of God was ready to return everything back to the way it always was originally. Lu nanu kulam b'chefetz lev, let's say, if only the people would have went with full desire and full vigor and excitement to go to leave exile and come. Aval rak chelkam nanu, but only a few answered the call. Only a small portion answered the call. Rubam v'anechmadim shebahem, most of them, and especially the honorable ones among them, nosru bebavel svei rasam and akvifos v'yashi, but they were satisfied to live under the heel of the Persian Empire. They were satisfied to stay there where they had their houses, they had their livelihood, they had their bank account. Yeah, they were living under the Persians, but they've been living there for 70 years already. They figured out how to live under the Persians, and they were happy to stay, right? Below Lazobes Bateim Ethesam, rather than leave behind their homes and their property. Ulai Aleim Himshel Shlomo Biamro. However, it's regarding these people that Solomon said in Shir Hashirim, he said this, he was referring to them in a parable. Ani Yeshena V'li I am asleep and my heart is awake. Bashena, what does he mean? Ramaz Legalis. He's talking about Gaulus. He's talking about exile. We're like asleep. Our hearts, Uve'ernos Halev, right? That our hearts know what the right thing to do, but our bodies are asleep, and we don't just do what we know in our hearts we should be doing, right? Because the prophecy remained among them. Kol donido fake, the voice of my beloved is knocking on the door. That's a famous title of an essay that Rav Soloveitchik, the Rosh Hashiva of YU, the famous Rav Soloveitchik, wrote an essay about Zionism entitled "Kol Dodido Fake." He used that because we're in the same reference, right? My beloved is knocking on the door. He's saying, "Come, come, come," right? Right? But you don't open the door, you don't let them in, and you don't leave. You don't go with them. Right? This is God's call to the people, to the Jewish people, to return to the land. Sheroshi nimlatol, my head is full of dew. So the image of this verse in Shir Hashirim is, if you wait outside and in the morning, you just sit outside and you wait for the guy who's out there waiting for everybody to come, his head gets all wet from the dew. Right? Roshi nimlatol. Right? It's a hint towards the Shechina, the godly presence, which is leaving it has left, right? God is saying, my head is full of dew. I'm waiting outside the temple. I'm waiting for you guys to come so that I can come in, right? God wants to bring his presence back to the temple, but he's waiting outside. And while he's waiting outside, his head gets all full of dew, like that guy who's just waiting outside for everyone else to come, right? It says, I've taken off my cloak, kiremez, right? I'm just sick and tired of waiting. I put my coat on. I'm ready to go, right? You know what? Nobody's coming. I've waited for long enough. I'm going to take my coat off, hang it back up in the closet, and take a seat on my couch because nobody's coming, right? Amar dodi shalach yadom achor. It's like my lover is putting his hand in the window, reaching for me to try to drag me out and take me, but I refuse to go with him. Remez al haftaras Ezra and Nehemiah v'Neviim. This is a hint towards the call of Ezra and Nehemiah and the prophets, alayhim shalom. Those three prophets that I mentioned, Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi, who were called, right? Ad shechalkam nanu anus belev valev, right? Until some did listen, and some people did listen to the call, right? And they were rewarded according to their intentions. And therefore, they ended up getting hurt because of their laziness and not going. The person receives the Spirit of God according to how prepared he is for it. If you're only a little prepared, you get a little. A lot is a lot. Had we really prepared ourselves to greet the Lord of our fathers with complete and pure intention, he would have helped us. Why just like he helped our forefathers in Egypt? Why wasn't there fire and brimstone? Why wasn't there splitting of the sea and thunder and lightning from Sinai and all the drama? The turning of the second temple was anything but. We learned from the prophets how people were crying. This is nothing like what we dreamed of, right? They were crying. Instead of being happy that they had a little return to Jerusalem, they're looking like, oh, this is nothing. Like they were expecting something big. It could have been if only we had been devoted to it as the Jewish people. Lefikach ein tziftzuf tzenu hishtachvu l'harkacho. Right. Therefore, um, um, right now we don't have the ability to be there, to bow at the God's holy mountain, and bow to the place where his feet reside, so to speak, in this world. And we don't get to see God being the one who returns his presence to Zion. The words that we speak, just like you challenged me, you said, we sit here and cry, Erachim, have mercy on Zion, the place where we live. Right, you're right. Those words are like the chatter of a parrot, right? A zarzir is a tuki, a myna bird, which is also like a parrot, also talks like a parrot. So our words, when we pray about Zion this, Zion that, Zion the other thing, they're like the words of a parrot. They're words, but they don't mean anything. The parrot doesn't have any idea what those words mean. They just say them. And the same thing, we sit in shul and we say all these words, but we don't mean them. They're nothing. We don't even grasp what it is that we're saying. Just like you said, Nasicha Kuzarim, you who are the king of the Khazars. Now, I assume that that's pretty powerful words there, and a pretty strong rebuke for those of us that don't live in the Holy Land. So now we have 10 minutes left to discuss what that means to us. So I'm opening the floor. I'm just going to say next week it's going to be a big change, a strong change in the discussion. We're going to leave the Zionist stuff out and we're going to go to a different topic. Well, not completely, but so that now is a good chance to talk about this. So I saw Jackie wanted to say something. Go ahead. I can't hear you. I think you need to unmute yourself.
I think that one has to really think in terms of Halevi's time and our time, in terms of the fact that during his time, there was no communication between people, or very difficult communication between people in the land of Israel, where these people are special because they're there, and because they're there, they're special and they're educated, and they have a one up on all of the rest of us based on what you were saying. But is it really the land itself, or is it the people in the land and the land that makes it such a special place? So that's, and let me complete that, so that if it is the people in the land and the land, communication with the people in the land by people who are not in the land really bridges the gap and makes you really part of the Jewish people in Israel. So that, for instance, now with communications, you can instantly talk daily with scholars in Israel. You can communicate, you can learn. You basically, as if you are there, you can actually do that. And you can have these people travel to you and you can travel there. So that basically there's a more interwoven connection between the diaspora today because of the way we can communicate as compared to decades and centuries before. So what I'm postulating is that we are bridging the gap to some degree, even though we may not be constantly there. Many of us travel there, many of us communicate daily, and it's as if we were there. So it's not as good, maybe, but I think in my mind, it's an improvement on his day.
Well, I don't think he would disagree that it's good to be connected to Israel. It's better than not being connected, and it's good. And Rabbi Levi would agree. Obviously, he couldn't have imagined, the internet, but 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 he definitely advocates and I think if you listen to last week's lecture, it's very clearly doubles down on the idea that there's an inherent holiness to the land itself, right? Which can't be replaced other than by being there. It's different than Maimonides, right? Who understands the special holiness of Israel to be holy because of our relationship to it, because of the things that happened there, because of and so on. But Rabbi Levi clearly understands and advocates that there's a special holiness to the land. So the idea that there's such a thing as an inherent holiness to a physical object is an idea that Rabbi Levi is definitely believes in and strongly advocates.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I disagree a little bit because I think the land makes the people and the people make the land, but the people are ultimately who make it happen. And in the land, but and the more you communicate with those people, the closer you really are, even if you aren't physically there all the time.
Well,
That that
there's support for both sides of this issue, right? It's an ongoing debate that we're never going to resolve. But
no,
Rabbi Levi clearly,
I'm just telling you my belief. So
and you're fine. You're supported by the
yeah,
Rambam. It's okay. You can believe that. It's good. And the Gemara who says Kedush Rishona Kid Shalasata, we make the land holy, right? There's plenty of Chazal that supports the Maimonidean point of view as well. But there's also plenty that we just learned today, that supports the idea that there's an inherent holiness. So whichever side you take, you're fine. But we're learning Rabbi Levi now. So
yeah,
he
I understand. I
definitely,
just
but
wanted to bring up the other side.
right,
And
right.
yeah,
No, that's
okay,
totally fine. It's totally fine.
yeah.
I see the other hand. Jeff, you have something to
Yeah.
say?
I don't know. The volume I have of the Khazar has a chapter B, which it's called Living in Israel. I don't know if this is at 3 pages, which I just read while we were discussing, where
Okay.
this is addressed in greater depth. And
Okay.
I wanted to ask you about this rationale, which seems to be uh, the basis, and that is,
Oh, yeah. It's here. It's at Appendix B. It's on page 609. I didn't
yeah,
read it, but
I don't know. I don't know who wrote it. I guess the
yeah,
author.
I am assuming it's Rabbi Korupkin who did this translation.
Okay.
But
Okay,
yeah, go
good.
ahead.
So
I didn't
he
read it, so
says,
but I'm hearing. Go
yeah,
ahead.
let me tell you because I read it while we were just, and he says, yes, Nachmanides, says you got to do it, but then he has this rationale, is that if we lived in the land of Israel, there are a number of serious commandments we would be violating, the Shemitah, tithes, and so on. So that
Hmm.
if people that are living in Israel, and then he says this, the latter commentaries understand that he advocates the lesser of two evils. Granted, it is improper to live outside of Israel, like Monty, okay, but better
Okay.
to violate a relatively lighter commandment. So, okay, so you're not living there, then violate heavier commandments of the various Israeli-based agricultural laws on a continual basis. So,
Well,
I just wondered what you think about that.
I don't buy that. I mean,
I'm glad
I
you.
know I don't live in Israel, and so and I recognize I believe that as Jews that's where we should be. I'm going to say that right now. I believe in fundamentally. There are reasons why. I mean, I could tell why don't I live in Israel? Well, number one, I really couldn't make a living there the way I make a living. Now, someone can argue I can go there and I could open the fruit store. There's things I could do, of course, and I won't be hungry and I'd be but I feel very fulfilled. And I think that what I'm doing in my life here is I think that I'm accomplishing more here and for me, for my family, and for the Jewish people and humans in general, with the abilities and resources and skills that are unique to where I am. I can
That's what
hear
I
people
told my
argue with
nephew
me.
this afternoon. Exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, people could argue with me. People could tell me that I'm wrong, and they have a legitimate point. It's fine, but when I go to sleep at night, why am I not there? Now, I do hope, and I'm going to say this clear straight out, that at the point in my life when I'm no longer contributing, hopefully, to study, to teach, I can do that anywhere, right? Um, so those certain things, when I'm retired, I do plan on retiring and living out my end of my life there, because at that point, with the contributions I make in my career and my and daily life, it will be different then. That's me. And there are times in history when our parents and grandparents didn't have that option. They just simply didn't have the ability to do it. Or it was dangerous, and they were scared to go, or the economics were so bad that you just couldn't do it. So there's different times we have different reasons. But in general, if I could rewind my life 50 years and do things over again, maybe I could have done it differently, but we can all kick ourselves at things we could have done differently, you know. If we really want to go back and think what we should have done, would have done, could have done, I mean, who knows, you know. But I think I don't buy that what he said there about the mitzvot sounds doesn't work, doesn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, so don't violate Shemitah. I don't understand. so so keep Shemitah. That makes no sense to me. What do you mean you're going to violate the law? Go to Israel and don't violate the laws. It makes no
Well,
sense.
but the Shemitah, I mean, they haven't observed the Shemitah Sabbath year's ties, right? That most people don't follow it in Israel. So
There's a lot of literature about it, and there's a lot of great rabbis that explain. Either some people sell the land, Rav Kook sells. So if you want to rely on that, rely on that. Some people don't sell the land. There's all kinds of ways, but nobody tells you have to violate Shemitah when you go. There's plenty of books you can
okay, I'm
read.
glad. And the other thing I want to quote from this explanation, where he says, he quotes Rabbi Feinstein, says it's obvious that he's quoting, it's obvious that nowadays it is not an obligatory commandment incumbent upon each individual. So it's supposed to be
Well,
obvious.
okay, so here's the thing. I'm not an expert in everything Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote, and but so Rav Moshe Feinstein is certainly a great man. He doesn't need me to say that, and he can write whatever opinion he feels is right. But the Kuzari, Rav Yehuda Halevi, absolutely did not agree with that. Right now, there's plenty of rabbis with plenty of opinions, and you can find tons of them, and they're all fine and good for and if you like them, great, go ahead. But we're learning Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, and Rabbi Yehuda Halevi 100% advocates going. Remember when he went to the land of Israel, he went to the land of Israel where the punishment for being a Jew in Israel was death, which is exactly what happened to him. He walked into Jerusalem out with a sword, done. That's what happened to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. That was he was willing to do in order to live out the last moments of his life in Israel. So he would not have bought any of that nonsense, right? Because that's what he did. And Nachmanides, who you quoted before, also did the same thing. Nachmanides was like 80 something years old when he picked up at, I don't know, maybe late 70s, somewhere around there. I don't know exactly.
Still young.
Well, yeah, still young. When he packed up his bags and went to Israel, and you could still got daven in the shul that he founded, right? So they certainly believed exactly what they wrote, which is, and believe me, their sacrifices in those days, you can't even remotely compare to the sacrifice that any of us would make if we picked up and moved to Israel today. I mean, not even remotely make a comparison, right? The trip alone, forget about when you get there, just the trip. Then those you're taking your life in your hands, just getting on a boat to go. Nowadays, you get on an airplane, it costs you a few bucks, and you get on a plane, you're done.
It wasn't easy. They had malaria. There were a lot of things that took people down. It was amazing. The interesting thing is that I've met some people in Israel that are really, have done things to move there and still maintain their livelihood. There was a radiologist that did the night shift, in the ERs in New York, and did that while he was there. There were people that were business people, stockbrokers that I met, people that ran mortgage companies in St. Louis and so forth. These people just basically ran their businesses from Israel and had a few people that helped them and would go back periodically. So I guess if you want to do it in certain situations, if you're in that situation, you could do it.
Yeah. No, there's no question that it's doable, and if you can, you should, and it's a mitzvah to do, and it's special, and those of us that aren't doing it aren't fulfilling that mitzvah, at least according to Rabbi Yehuda Halevi. If you want to go by other authorities, you're welcome to do so. That's your prerogative. But Rabbi Yehuda Halevi clearly advocated that, and to claim otherwise, it means you just didn't read the book. But other opinions as to why not to go to Israel, I'm sure if you ask 20 Jews in New York and Australia and Britain and God knows wherever else Jews live, they'll give you 20 reasons why they're not there,
And they're all rationalizations. We're all kidding ourselves,
That's right.
When we die, we'll if we die here, we'll feel be bad, and we'll know that we did not do the right thing. But I would like to ask Saul. So, just one thing. So, would it have been so hard for Hashem in the Ten Commandments? So while he's telling us, not to worship idols and to honor our parents and to observe Shabbos say, and you should live in the land of Israel. And
Well,
that
one
would
would
take it away.
argue
That would
that.
take away the BS about excuses.
Well, among I mean, there's a lot of mitzvot that aren't in the Ten Commandments, but according to Rabbi Levi, living in Israel is one of them.
See, but that's what I
The
mean.
Torah
It would
certainly
be
tells us a lot about the importance of living in Israel, right? Rabbi Levi didn't make this up; he got it from the Torah, right?
right.
So it's there. Why isn't it one of the Ten Commandments? I'm not sure. Interesting question, but it's in the Torah. It's there, definitely there. I see a hand up. Barry, go ahead.
Now, there were three tribes who wanted to stay on the east side of the Jordan.
Right.
And they made a deal with Moshe that we'll do something for you and we can do more for you out here. And we'll pay our taxes and so on. We'll lead a few, battles. And it seems to me Yehuda Halevi himself, I've heard this as one of the five reasons Nachmanides gives that you don't have to settle in Israel. As you said, and you gave the example also, Saul, that you can do more for the people and for the survival of Judaism by living outside the land. Some people, that's true. But isn't Yehuda Halevi an example of that? He accomplished a lot.
So much outside of the land. Yeah,
Right.
maybe that's that. But he didn't answer that, right? He did,
No.
but his specific answer to the Chazar's question, right? And we have to read into every answer that the Chaver gives as an answer that Rabbi Levi is himself giving, right? He's just putting, and he says, "You're right. I should go," you know. And I'm sure if we could meet him today and back him into a corner and say, all right, tell me your reasons for not being there now, and he would probably, I don't know, I have no idea what he would say. That this is really out of my, I shouldn't say probably what he would say, but I'll say it anyway. Probably he would give a good reason. He would talk about what he's achieving here and how, and people look up to him, and he was a leader, and he was important, and he had relationships, and he had a family, and he had, and he needed to be where he was, but I don't know. It's bottom line that the Khazar, yeah.
But if you were recruiting the Khazar kingdom to practice Judaism, this doesn't seem to be a winning argument. I mean, you could recruit them as a partner or a collaborator with agreements and trade and so on.
Yeah.
But to try to convince them that he should pick up his kingdom and move to Israel doesn't seem to be practical.
Yeah, well, the king already took the plunge. Too late, right?
Okay.
He already converted by this part of the book. But
Yeah.
all right, well, there's obviously a lot to talk about. It's an important subject, but it's fascinating in a lot of ways. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Next time around, we're gonna have a very different view. I'll give you a little hint of carbonot, of sacrifices. Very different approach than the Rambam had. So we'll be talking about that next week. I look forward to learning together with everybody. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Saul.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Saul.